But this week on SKORNorth.com, Judd Zulgad has been counting down the 5 greatest Vikings quarterbacks
Football.
of all time. And who's on your panel? I know I'm on your panel because I have my own list.
Patrick Royce, Matthew Collar, Phil Mackey, and yours truly.
Okay,
I wasn't called.
For generations of
it's
people
not a
who
Bears.
follow Vikings
It's not a
football.
Bears list, Rami. It's a Vikings list. I think it'd be fair to ask you to do it.
By the way, I don't even know if we have a list of 5 greatest Bears quarterbacks of all time.
The Vikings
Hey,
list is
Don't sell Sid Luckman short, all right?
Jay Cutler.
Is he like 1, 2, 3? And then it's like Jay Cutler
Actually, no.
and
Jay
Jim
Cutler
McMahon?
is one. Jay Cutler is the greatest
Rami, can you
quarterback.
actually put this list together
Do you
for
want
us?
me to?
Yes.
I'll
Bobby
work on it right
Douglas?
now. I'll work on it right now.
Vince Evans.
Yeah, put this list together. We'll get to
Rami,
it.
you there?
We'll get to the
Yes.
Bears list.
I had to reach for a pen, guys. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So I've got you gave us instructions that we should rank 1 through 8, right?
Yes.
And then you
I went
would
with the
go
5
one by one. You'd
with the
post the
points.
top 5.
with points. Yes.
So who's been unveiled so far on SKORNorth.com?
Number 5 unveiled on Monday was Warren Moon. Number 4 unveiled yesterday was Tommy Cramer, the QB of my childhood. And then number 3 today was basically the one-year wonder, and that's Brett Favre.
Okay.
Now I will say this. Randall Cunningham did not make the list officially, and that's the one where I will tell you flat out that Favre's presence is a recency bias. Because there's a really
what's the difference between the two?
there's a really good case, but that's what makes this list fun. And just quickly, I also think 1 and 2 are pretty clear cut. Okay, Tarkenton's 1, but the other reason why I wanted to do this, boys, was 3 through 5 was so much fun because this is a franchise that's been around since 1961, right? And like you would think that you would have, I don't know, let's say 4, if not 5, just like, oh, those are the slam dunks.
No, it's tough.
And it's really tough.
It's tough.
And the Green Bay Packers have had 2 quarterbacks since 92.
Right.
So-
and they've had 3 that are obvious in their history.
Yeah, with Bart.
And you can't even say that about the Vikings. You can't say that there are just 3, like it's the top 3, and then you can debate. I think number 1. So I've got Fran Tarkenton number 1, and then I will count from the bottom up.
Okay.
So we can preserve some
Perfect.
suspense.
Perfect.
I mean, Fran Tarkenton. So I value peak greatness over longevity, but
Mhm.
Fran Tarkenton had both.
Mhm.
He played in the NFL for 2 decades, and throughout portions of those 2 decades, he was regarded as one of the greatest quarterbacks in the league. He was certainly one of the greatest scramblers of all time. So if my 2 general bins are peak greatness and longevity, and I put peak greatness ahead of longevity, Fran Tarkenton checks both those boxes as a Minnesota Viking. All right, let's go back to the bottom of the list here. Number 8 on my list of all-time. Actually, you know what, Jonathan? Let's fire up a little
I think this
appropriate
needs music.
here.
I was just
let's
going to
do
say
this.
that.
Let's do
I have
this.
another sound effect suggestion a little later in the show, but
What,
What's
for
that?
Vikings quarterbacks? Is it a
What's
fart
that,
noise
Robbie?
or
I was
what?
gonna say, what's that,
Well,
Robbie?
that'd be for the Bears quarterback.
no, I had this thought already, and then Chad tweeted it in. Masters sounds. Today the
Oh.
Masters would have teed off.
No, that would be tomorrow.
Oh, was it tomorrow? Okay.
But we
Then-
can
starts
do
on
that
Thursday.
tomorrow.
Okay.
Yeah, today would have been the par 3 tournament.
Yep.
Birds chirping.
But we can just do Masters music under the whole show tomorrow.
We'll just have Masters ambiance.
Sure. Some babbling brooks. All right, so number 8, Teddy Bridgewater.
Can we just drop in a hello, friends, every once in a while?
Every segment needs to start with hello, friends, tomorrow. So Teddy Bridgewater is number 8 on my great Vikings quarterback list.
Okay.
He's not a great Vikings quarterback, but
Mhm.
your instructions were to rank 1 through 8.
Mhm.
And I've got Bridgewater ahead of, I've got him ahead of Wade Wilson. I've got him ahead of certainly Christian Ponder. I've got him ahead of Brad Johnson. Because I think Teddy Bridgewater at his best was better than Brad Johnson at his best. Brad Johnson had more starts, I believe, as a Vikings quarterback.
Mhm.
So Teddy Bridgewater, number 8.
Okay.
This is where you might take issue. This is where our listeners might take issue because I have Tommy Cramer 7th.
Here's what I've been saying, and I said this on SKOR North Live during Sports Dad Stories with Rami today. If you didn't see guys play back then and just look at the raw statistics of a lot of quarterbacks, a lot, not all, in the 70s and 80s make you want to plug your nose immediately.
For sure.
And you're like, oh, pew, look at the record. Look at the counting stats.
Well,
But-
like the record shouldn't be.
Well, but I'm just saying you can look at a lot of things and dismiss them. The area where I give them credit is they were sitting ducks and they were targets and
For
the
sure.
league didn't care. And so I watched Cramer play, because when I went and Googled his Pro Football Reference stats, Phil, they're not pretty.
Right.
So
and really the only,
it's a difficult conversation.
even in the 80s, really the only two quarterbacks that were just putting up numbers that you could compare to the modern era were Joe Montana and Dan Marino, right? And maybe a little John Elway in the late 80s.
Yep.
That said, I actually went through, because you're right. If you take Tommy Cramer's stats on paper and try to think of them in the same light as even like Kirk Cousins' stats right now, you'd say, whoa, this dude had equal touchdowns and interceptions. That's terrible.
Yep.
That's what Jameis Winston had last year. But I went a little deeper, and this is why I have him 7th on my list. I'm not trying to bag on him. I just don't think he's one of the 5 greatest Vikings quarterbacks of all time because I value peak greatness. His backup, Wade Wilson, made 48 starts for the Vikings during the 80s. I mean, that right there, they essentially
Cramer was hurt a ton, yeah.
He was hurt a lot. They even when he was healthy sometimes, weren't they rotating quarterbacks in the Jerry Burns era in the late 80s at
Remember
times?
when they used to rotate quarterbacks in this league?
Well, I mean, there's so many things this league used to do. Do you remember when concussions were celebrated as a great thing? Yeah, I got jacked up. That's awesome.
One of my favorite
can't
videos, one of my favorite VHS videos as a kid was NFL's Greatest Hits. And
I
it was
love it.
literally 45 minutes of just like guys getting brain damage
I
and
know.
two
Guys,
guys watching and narrating and laughing.
Let's all be honest here. Let's be totally honest and transparent. If that was still being produced today, would you watch it?
Yes.
I would absolutely watch it.
Heartbeat.
I'm here for big hits.
I miss Jacked Up on Monday nights.
If you plugged that VCR tape into a TV in which you found a VCR today, I would sit down immediately, stop what I'm doing, and watch it.
Yeah, I'm here for it. And by the way, I think I still have that video. So if you want me to bring it in, we could probably.
Do we have a
find
VCR
Do we have
somewhere?
a VCR?
There's got to be. If not, we can probably. Oh, it's a TV station downstairs. They have a VCR somewhere. Old
they?
tapes.
All right.
We'll find it.
I still have a VCR at my parents' house and all my VCR cassettes.
Wipe it down. Bring it in.
Might be too late.
And don't kill your parents by giving them coronavirus.
I was
Right?
going to say that's not good. Okay, 6.
But
No.
let me just finish the Tommy Cramer point.
All
All
right.
right. So I think Tommy Cramer had one relative to the league, not relative to like modern stats. He had one big season as a quarterback. 1986. He was a Pro Bowler. He put up big touchdown numbers. He actually led the NFL in passer rating, if you want to go about the stats. That was the only time in his career that he ever finished inside the top 12 in the NFL in passer rating. And so I think Tommy Cramer's longevity as Vikings quarterback throughout an entire decade puts him top of mind. Obviously, he took up a huge chunk of Vikings history as the starting quarterback, but he doesn't check the peak greatness box as much as other people above him on this list. All right.
3rd grade Judd went to school wearing a Tommy Cramer jersey, man. Okay, that's all you
And
need
that's
to know
fine.
about my voting.
Listen, I love 3rd grade Judd. He was just
Totally biased.
wrong about Tommy Cramer. All right.
Completely biased. Loves him.
I love that Maggie is arguing with a 3rd grader right now. Telling you your quarterback sucks.
The scary thing, I was probably smarter back then.
All right.
Because you started drinking in the 4th grade and it was all downhill from there.
Amazing. All right, number 6 on my list is Warren Moon because for a couple years there, and much like the Tommy Cramer era, the Vikings had a lot of 9-7 throughout the 80s, a lot of 9-7 throughout the 90s, and Warren Moon had one year that was one of the best passing years of his entire career with the Vikings, and so I might as well have those guys tied. But
Sure.
All right, now we get to the 5.
Yep.
Kirk Cousins is the 5th greatest Vikings quarterback of all time. Again, stats now versus stats early in like the 70s, 80s, it's hard to compare them. But how can I leave Kirk Cousins out of the top 5 when he has the highest passer rating in Vikings history, the 2nd most yards per game, the 2nd highest completion percentage, and a big road playoff win? He's the 5th greatest Vikings quarterback right now.
I didn't vote for him.
That said, I would not have signed him to a contract extension, but he's 5th. Did you not put him in your 8?
I did not put him in my 5.
Okay.
Yeah. He's outside my 5.
Randall Cunningham 4, because he's responsible. I know he only had one big year, but he is responsible for one of the biggest seasons in Vikings history, and his numbers and his contributions and being able to find Randy Moss that many times. Well, you could just throw the ball up. Okay. It's a little more complicated than that. Randall Cunningham was wonderful in 1998. Number 3, Dante Culpepper. At one point, I think you could argue for like a 3 or 4 year stretch, he was a top 5 quarterback. Certainly the year that he finished 2nd to Peyton Manning in the MVP voting. And then there was a couple other years where he was unstoppable as a runner, So Dante Culpepper, number 3. He also has the longevity box checked more than some of these other guys.
As a Viking, for sure, yes.
Not that long, but like 5 years, right?
Right.
Number 2, another guy who was responsible for one of the greatest seasons in Vikings history, Brett Favre.
Mm-hmm.
And Fran Tarkenton, number 1. Those are my greatest Vikings quarterbacks of all time.
The only placements that I would quibble with you to the point of dropping the gloves probably is Culpepper and Favre. I would flip them.
Okay.
And have Favre third. But besides that, yeah, I mean, this is the Cunningham one. I'm telling you, it bugs me that I didn't get him in the top 5 because Favre is there. And I cannot sit here and tell you unequivocally, this is why, and Cunningham does not belong and Favre does. I can't do it.
Sure. And I think
so I would actually agree with you on that one.
If some people might ask, well, why do you have a guy in Tommy Cramer who played more than 10 years as mostly the starting quarterback for a decade, right? Why is he 7 and a guy who played a year and change, Brett Favre, number 2 on your list? For the same reason, when I think of greatest Twins pitchers ever, Jack Morris is one of the first guys that pops in my head. And for the same reason, when you think about great running backs in the 1990s in the NFL, it's like Terrell Davis pops into your head. Terrell Davis had like 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
Jack Morris had 1 year with the Twins, but
But
because they were so great.
Running backs, you almost expect that short arc for them in terms of the peak of their career, right? Because the shelf life of a running back is so short for the most part. The Adrian Petersons and the Walter Paytons of the world and Emmitt Smiths, who are at the top of their game and as productive as any running back in the league for 8, 9, 10 years. Those come around once or twice a lifetime.
And I guess you could make the case, the counter argument that, the short shelf life of Vikings quarterback is a real thing too, historically. So
true.
Some good, some bad.
I mean, you look at this list, and Fran Tarkenton and Tommy Cramer are really the only guys that were like longtime starting quarterbacks with the franchise.
Yep.
Dante was 5 years. Brett Favre and Randall Cunningham were 5 minutes. Kirk Cousins is 2 years. Warren Moon was 3 years. Bridgewater was 2 years. It's amazing.